now our next speaker, Javier Cuevas from Bulldog.
Hello? Can you hear me? Yes. Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. I have a problem. I only have 20 minutes, and I have 40 minutes. So I'm not going to move here. I'm going to be very fast, so please follow me if you can. So my name is Javier Cuevas. I'm from Madrid, Spain, and I'm co-founder and CTO of Bulldog. Before Bulldog, I used to be leading a Ruby on Rails and Elixir consulting company. So unlike Pedro, I'm not a mobile developer, despite I'm doing mobile right now. Now that you know a little bit about me, here is a little bit about my company. Bulldog is a marketplace that connects dog owners and dog sitters. We are basically Airbnb for dogs. We started back in 2012 and became the first alternative to dog kennels in Europe. We are a small team of less than 10 people, and we are only 2 developers, me and another partner. In 2015, we launched our first mobile app. It was a hybrid app built with Cordova and a unique framework. And last September, we introduced our first React Native app. Before we dig into React Native, I want to take a step back and think about why mobile matters, and why did it matter for us at Bulldog, and why probably it should matter for your company or for your next project. This chart is Bulldog traffic by type of device from summer 2013 to 2015. The blue line is the desktop, and the green one is mobile. Can you guess what happened in early 2015? That's right. The mobile traffic went crazy, surpassing desktop traffic to the point where nowadays desktop only represents 20% of our traffic. This was hard for me to see. As most of you have grown out with computers, and it seems that today no one cares about them anymore. Well, people are actually, they are crazy about computers, but not the ones with a screen and a desktop, but the ones that we all carry in our pocket. In 2015, we had no option. Either we embrace mobile, or we will quickly become irrelevant in the market. So with a small team of just web developers, we did what was available for us back then, building a hybrid app using Cordova and a unique framework, which is based in AngularJS. This was the result. While we were able to ship the app in just 6 weeks, a few months later, we realized we were not meeting our user expectations for a mobile app. And this was having an obvious impact in our app reviews. It was a real challenge to iterate and offer a decent experience while being locked inside a web view. Early last year, we started checking out React Native. React Native, which initially had only support for iOS, had gained Android support at the end of 2015. And since then, it started to gain a huge amount of traction. So we decided to give it a try. We started building an MVP of our search form, which included things like the date picker and other widgets that we knew they could be challenging to build. And it was working well, so we decided to give it a try. It took us 3 months to get the first version in production, but it was way better than our previous hybrid app. Here is the result. So that's September when we introduced the new React Native app. So before we move into the actual talk, how many of you have you used React? Please, like half. And from the ones who have used React, how many have used React Native? Okay, so like about 10 people. Okay, cool. So as this talk is about React Native, and you have different backgrounds, we need to make a quick stop to introduce React for half of the audience who are not familiar with it. So first, React is a JavaScript library for building user interface. It's not a whole framework for front-end application. It's just for the UI part. It's created by Facebook. It is declarative, which means that our user interface will be a function of our data. In other words, our code will look like, here is how the component should look like for this state of the data, instead of doing imperative calls to change the markup of the component as the data changes. I'm looking at you, jQuery. It's component-based, meaning that we will abstract each meaningful piece of UI into an individual component, and then we will compose those small components into larger components. At the end, our app will be a single component with a large tree of descendants. Finally, the motto behind React is that you learn the framework once and you'll be able to apply in different environments. At some point, you might even be able to write once and run anywhere. So how does a React component look like? Sorry, I forgot to change the background of this one. A React component can be a pure function that takes data in or a class that extends React.component. If we define it as a class, it needs to have a render method. I don't know if you can see it there. We pass data into components as if they were HTML attributes. And then when this data changes, React will call the render method again. And the nice thing about React is that when it calls the render method, it gets the result and it computes the result with the previous version of the render method. And it only will send down to the DOM the minimum set of changes. That's what we call the virtual DOM, and is the main thing that makes React so successful. If some of you haven't seen React code before, you might be wondering what is this HTML within JavaScript. This is called JSX, and it's a JavaScript extension. And it basically means that you'll need to transpile this file into plain JavaScript. If you don't like it, you could do this thing. You could just use React create element there and here, and you'll be able to just use simple JavaScript. But actually, no one does that nowadays. If you are like me, and if you got to web development 10 years ago, you are probably familiar with the principle of separation of concerns, and maybe you have been told that that means that you should put your HTML, JavaScript, and style sheet into different files. Instead, the React team argues that the markup and the component and the component logic, the JavaScript, are a single concern. Therefore, it's okay to have them in the same file. Even if with React, if you want, you can actually move the template to a different file, but no one does that in practice. And now, moving into React Native. Here are the 4 key points that you should know about React Native. First, it lets you build native, and again, I say native, mobile apps using JavaScript and React. The main target for React Native right now are iOS and Android. It does not compile JavaScript into native code, and I will repeat this again later. It does not use a web view, and I will repeat this again later. And what are the main selling points of React Native, in my opinion, after almost a year working with it? First, it's super fast to iterate, both in development, thanks to hot reloading, and also in production, thanks to code push. So code push basically means that you can release an update of your application without going through the Apple Store or the Play Store. You just have a service that when you just include a library that when the user opens the app, it checks if there is any update, and if there is an update, it downloads the new JavaScript bundle, and next time the user starts the app, they will get the new version. It is close enough to cross-platform. In our case, we are sharing 99% of our code, basically. We just have to handle a few particular cases, such as the weird iPhone X screen or the Android back button. As you'll see later, another benefit of React Native is that you can leverage a huge community. And finally, React Native is being used in production by many large companies like Facebook, Instagram, Uber Eats, Microsoft, Netflix, and so on. For small teams like us, React Native allows us to offer a native experience in both platforms without requiring 2 native teams. For larger teams, React Native allows you to move faster by testing out new app features without having to write them twice. Now let's see how React Native compares to the React that most of you are familiar with. To the left, we have a classic set of HTML primitives that we use in the web world. And to the right, we will have like the equivalent in React Native. So instead of a div, in React Native, we have a view. If we need that view to be scrollable, we'll use a scroll view instead. For any kind of text, we'll be using just a text component, and then we will style it. Remember that this is React, so you can grab any component into another one. So if you need a headline and you want to reuse the styles of a headline, just create a headline component that has a text on it with the proper styles. For touchable things, React offers us two low-level components, touchable opacity and touchable native feedback. If we need something that actually looks like a button right away, we can use the new official button component, which has already different styles to match the platform style on Android, and which is material design, and on iOS. Now, let's take a look to how to style components on React Native. So writing styles for your React Native component is quite similar to writing CSS. The main difference is that the styles are defined in JavaScript using the stylesheet.create method. Most CSS properties are the same, except that names are written using camel casing. Probably the biggest difference in terms of styling is that in React Native, we are limited to using Flexbox for layout. So no floats, no tables, but who would want to use that anymore? Now, if you remember what I mentioned you before, React Native does not use web views, and it does not compile your JavaScript into something else. But your app somehow will be still native. So maybe some of you are like this right now. That's me telling you, no web view. Yeah, so that's kind of like the feeling I had, like, so how this thing is work, and you want to go check it out. So that's what we are going to do next. So how does React Native work? When using React Native, our app runs across two different worlds, or two different realms, the JavaScript one and the native one. Variables defined in one realm cannot be accessed in the other. All communication between the two worlds, or the two realms, must be done over the bridge. The bridge is the less performant part of React Native. So if we send too many messages between the two worlds, it will become a bottleneck. We must keep passes over the bridge to a minimum. However, thanks to React's virtual DOM, when data changes and a React component gets re-rendered, React computes the minimum set of changes needed, and that's the only thing that gets sent over the bridge. So React, again, React the library, not React Native in this case, is doing all that heavy lifting and is making sure that this communication is kept to a minimum. Most of the times, we don't have to think too much about this bridge, but it's important to know this. Like, we have JavaScript, we have native. On the JavaScript side, that's where most of our code is going to be, like our business logic. All our JavaScript code will be bundled into a single file here. There is only a single thread here running our JavaScript code, so make sure we don't lock this thread. But unlike a web view, the UI is running on the other side. If we have a web view, both the UI and the JavaScript are competing on the same thread, unless we are using something like web workers. But in this case, all the UI is happening on the native side. How does this look like in code? Again, sorry for the black background, but here is the React component. So it's just basically a view and a text. So when the render method gets called, what React Native does is to send this message over the bridge, and then the native side of React Native will read this message. By the way, this is a queue, so all the message gets queued. The React Native side will read this message and will call the proper native code. This is iOS, sorry. But if we are targeting Android, this will be Android calls to the native views of Android. Now that I have convinced all of you to use React Native, I guess, how should you get started? I normally think about three different approaches. The first one, which I call I want to test React Native right away. That will be to use React Native app and Expo client. We'll see it later. The second one is the classic way, which is like the official way. You basically install React Native, and then you install Android Studio and Xcode, because remember, we are dealing with native apps, so we need to compile them. And the third one, which is I'm building something serious, but I got a million questions way, which is like the second one, the B option, but you have to answer a lot of questions, and you don't know what to do. So the first one, which is create React Native app, is super simple. We just need to to install this package and then run create React Native app and the name of our project. We go to that directory and we start the project. How do we see the application? Well, we use the Expo client. So the Expo client is an application that you can install on Android and iOS. So when you do npm start, what you get is this is your terminal. You get this QR code. You go to your phone, you open the Expo client, you scan the QR, and then here you are seeing your application running. And the nice thing is that you get hot reloaded out of the box. So you change something on the file, you see it on your phone. This is how it looks in terms of code. So this is the structure that you will get from create React Native app. You just get an app.js, an app.test.js, and package.json to start adding dependencies that you might want to use. And this is the code for the app.js. It's quite simple. Again, this is if you see this text, is what we were seeing here. So if you change this text, you will see the changes on your phone right away. Another way to do this thing is to use something called Snack. So Snack is snack.expo.io. It's like a code pen for React Native application. It's based on Expo. And the difference is that you don't even have to do anything locally. You just go here, you start writing React Native code here, you can create new files, and then you can see them either here on the preview or also on your own phone. This is being very used in the community to share like snippets, problems, like people on Stack Overflow, when they have a problem or a question about React Native, they will create a snack and they will share the URL. When we have our React Native application running and we have already understood how the hello world works, now the question is, what do I need to build an actual app with React Native? So if we want to do like the real thing, first we are going to need Android Studio for Android and Xcode, for iOS. We also need Watchman to watch for the changes in our file system. So this will be like the official way. We install React Native CLI, which is the official CLI. We need the project, and then we have these two commands to run on iOS or run on Android. If we don't pass anything, they will try to be run on a simulator. If we add that dash device, they will run on a connected device. But then, again, React is just a UI library, and React Native is just a way to use React and JavaScript to write native mobile apps. But there are still so many open questions, like how do I organize my project structure, or how do I take care of the state? What do I do with the side effects? How am I going to manage my relational data? And one of the most important one, which is how I'm going to take care of navigation between screens. There are a million of questions, a million of ways to answer this. This table is just a few of the options that at Woodog we consider for each one of these things. It might seem like a lot, but the good thing from my point of view is that from this table, only the ones who are in orange are actually specific for React Native. All the others are just normal NPM package. So basically, when using React Native, you can take advantage of any library, any JavaScript library, which does not rely on the DOM. Obviously, if you are trying to import a JavaScript widget that is designed for the DOM, it's not going to work. But besides of those, you also have all of these which are specific for a React Native application. One example of those packages that is specific for React Native application is React Native Gifted Chat, which basically is a UI for creating a message system. So this is what we use in our app. We have obviously changed all the styles, and nowadays we could actually write our own, but it was a huge benefit to have this when we were starting, because we didn't have to take care of making sure that when there is a new message, this scrolls up, and what happens when the keyboard opens and when it closes, and having like different kind of message. It was all there ready for us to be used. Another example is React Native Maps, which was originally built by the team at Airbnb. It gives you a React-like declarative JavaScript API to work with maps. It supports both Google Maps and iOS MapKit. Remember that these maps are absolutely native. There is no web view going on here. So the performance for dragging, pitching, and so on is the same that you will have in any other native app. Now, how do you make sense of all these different options and libraries? Well, we started with React Native at Godot. We were overwhelmed by the number of options. We assumed there must be someone clever than us who already spent time thinking about this. And that's how we found Ignite. So Ignite is a CLI created by a company called InfiniteRed, a consulting company who was previously known for his contributions to Ruby Motion. I don't know if you're familiar with Ruby Motion, but it was a way to use Ruby to build iOS applications. The CLI allows you to leverage different boilerplates for React Native so that you don't have to think too much about all the decisions that you have to make when building a large application. The generators will create skeletons for different parts of your application depending on the boilerplate that you are using. If you have ever used Rails or Django in Python, you'll feel at home while using Ignite generators. Finally, plugins will allow you to add common features to your apps, such as maps, like the library that we were seeing before. Adding, if we are using Ignite, is just to do Ignite, add maps, and that will make sure that the library is on your package.json file, that all the native dependencies are linked, and so on. You can also, before that, note that an Ignite project is just a React Native Classic project. So when you don't find value anymore on using the CLI or the boilerplate, you can just remove it from your package.json file and move on. This is exactly what we did in Godot. We started with Ignite, and now we are not using anymore because we already have our own way to do things. But it was a huge benefit when we got started. You can also fork your preferred boilerplate and edit the templates for the generators so that they better suit your needs. Even if you don't like the CLI, I will still recommend you to take a look to the existing boilerplates for Ignite so that you can have a better sense of how people are building their real-world React Native apps. Like, are they using Redux? Are they using MoveX? Are they using TypeScript? Those kind of things. Now that you have a brief idea of how to get started creating your first mobile app with React Native, there is something else I want to show you. The great beauty of React Native architecture is that it's designed to support other target platforms, not just Android and iOS. This means we can use React Native to go beyond mobile. For example, Microsoft, aka the GitHub's parent company now, offers React Native Windows, which allows you to use React Native to build Windows and even Xbox apps. By the way, now that I mentioned Xbox, talking about TVs, there is also React Native also supports Apple TV and Android TV as well. Another very interesting one is React Native Web, which allows React Native primitives such as view, text, and so on to be used in web, which is a bit weird because the idea of React Native was to use React for mobile, and now we are using it for web. But it makes sense because, again, you can reuse code. However, React Native Web, instead of offering a new target platform, what it does is to replace your, like underneath, it will replace your views and text for actual HTML components. An even more interesting library is React Native DOM, which is quite new. It was introduced, I think, like a month or 2 months ago. And as opposed to React Native Web, this new library exposed the web as a new target for React Native. This means that you can expect the same behavior on iOS, Android, and the DOM, the web, basically. It is still in an experimental phase, but it's worth checking out. Finally, Restart is another library that allows you to bootstrap a cross-platform React Native project. Let's say that you already know that you want to do mobile and you want to do web. So with Restart, you can get to speed a little bit faster. Finally, here is a simple chart to help you decide whether you should use React Native for your mobile app. So, if you hate JavaScript, well, I feel your pain. There is not much I can do. I could recommend you TypeScript if the problem that you have with JavaScript is that it doesn't have types. but this is still JavaScript. I wrote Ruby code for 8 years, so it took me a while to get used to write JavaScript every day, but it is feasible. If you don't hate it, the next question is whether it's a brand new project. React Native can be used both for new apps and also for existing apps. If you are working with an existing app, then the question is, can you lobby your existing native team? Like, can you combine them to embrace React Native and not fight against React Native? If you cannot, then I'm sorry. If you can, or if it's a brand new project, I think you should totally consider using React Native. And that's it.
Questions over there.
Not that guy, I know him.
I hate him. I really hate him. It's really personal.
Hi, Javier. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
One question, it's not so very technical, but more of expectations, I guess. So as you presented some library, like you mentioned the React Native maps developed by Airbnb, and just recently, like a week ago or so, Airbnb said that they're kind of dropping React Native. How do you... We didn't plan this, but you had it coming, so yeah. Well, and we have the same thing, so I just want to share and cry together if you have to.
I saw that coming. So yeah, for those of you who, by the way, we didn't organize this thing, but I was expecting this for real. I'm so glad you asked. So for those of you who are not aware of it, one of the biggest teams pushing React Native, it was Airbnb team. They have 200 developers in total, engineers, and they did a big effort with libraries like the one I saw you, React Native Maps, and recently they announced that they are abandoning React Native. And it was a huge thing on the React Native community because they were like, you know, why are they like, they actually wrote 5 different blog posts on Medium explaining why. But my opinion on it is that it's basically about internal politics on a big dev team. Basically, if you have one of the best teams on Android development and iOS development out there, like native teams, it's actually hard to combine those people to embrace React Native. I think I think Airbnb was having a huge success with React Native because they were able to build new feature as fast as they will do it in web. They were even able to share some code between mobile and web. And the guy who was leading the React Native effort within Airbnb had this vision of actually doing like, it was like the cross-platform dream. They even have a Sketch plugin that will allow you to import React components into Sketch. So basically, the answer will be, I think, is politics. That's why I include that question on the flowchart. Like, if you have a native team, talk with them, make sure they are on board, because otherwise you're going to face a huge pushback.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Is there any? Okay, I think it was him. So if you are really quick, and you two, maybe we'll have both. Do you feel the pressure now?
Yeah. I'll be quick to answer them as well.
So I always ask the question for them.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
To our guests. They're not. Just feed them information there.
Hello.
Hello.
I was just wondering, what do you think about native script and its recent implementation with Vue?
I don't have an opinion. Like, I haven't tested out, like really. So anything I can say is not going to be informed.
But do you think it's a good competition against React Native?
I think some of the, like React Native, they have borrowed ideas from previous technologies, like a bunch of them. And I think now there are new players who are doing the same. And I think that's that's good. Like, I do think that React still has a larger community, and myself, I don't see myself as a true programmer. Like, I do many other things. I just need to solve problems. So I need to build a mobile app. I just try to find the tool that gets me the job done. So, and when looking at that decision from that angle, to me it's very important how is the health of the community at that point. My experience with React Native is that the community is very healthy, and also the fact that you can leverage all the JavaScript ecosystem. It has been a great advantage for us.
Okay, thank you.
That was nice. That was good. The other one. Now you have all the pressure.
Hi.
Hello.
My question is about when you have some animations you need to create on the native platform. For example, if you have a collection view and you have some animation directly from the native platform.
So you can do it in JavaScript, but obviously it's not going to be super performant, and you can do it on the native side. There is something called, there is an attribute which is, there is actually an API for animation, official, that comes with React Native, which is called animation, and it has an option which is called use native driver. So basically, this API that React Native gives you, it already takes care of sending the definition or the implementation of your animation to the native side, executing it there, and giving you the callbacks when you need it. But they run on the native side, and you can totally achieve 60 frames per second without any problem.
Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing.
That's not
No.
Yes, you can.
Thank you to the organizer. Like, really, you've been taking care of all of us like a lot. So I just want to ask for an applause for you guys.